17-year-old Kendrick Johnson walked into Lowndes High School one Thursday afternoon and never walked out. The next morning, his body was found upside down inside a rolled-up gym mat. Local investigators quickly called it a tragic accident, claiming Kendrick had fallen in while reaching for a sneaker and suffocated. But his family never believed that. They insist someone killed Kendrick and that officials helped cover it up. Over the last decade, the case has spiraled into one of the most controversial and emotionally charged unsolved deaths in modern American true crime. The official story has been rejected by grieving parents, challenged by independent autopsies, and dissected across countless internet threads and documentaries. Each detail has sparked outrage, doubt, and more questions than answers. From missing organs to surveillance footage gaps, federal grand juries to billion-dollar lawsuits, the story of Kendrick Johnson isn't just about what happened inside a school gym. It's about what people believe happened and why the truth has been so hard to agree on. As Kendrick's mother, Jackie Johnson, said on the 10th anniversary of his death, "They killed the wrong child, but they got the right parents, because we are not going anywhere." Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we examine every clue, every contradiction, and every theory before using logic, evidence, and elimination to figure out what most likely happened to Kendrick Johnson. Do you want to bring bad things with you wherever you go? Our episodes are now available as a podcast. Look us up on your favorite podcast app and listen to the most truth-seeking true crime podcast out there. On January 10, 2013, Kendrick Johnson, a 17-year-old sophomore at Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia, attended classes as usual. Just after 1:27 p.m., surveillance footage captured him jogging into the school's old gym, a quiet corner of the building where students sometimes stored belongings. Kendrick often kept his gym shoes there, tucked inside the hollow center of a rolled-up wrestling mat to avoid locker fees. He didn't return to class afterward, and that evening his parents reported him missing. The next morning, students using the old gym spotted socks sticking out of one of the upright mats stored behind the bleachers. Inside, they discovered Kendrick's body, positioned headfirst in the vertical mat. His feet were visible at the top. Staff called authorities immediately. The Lowndes County Sheriff's Office responded. Kendrick was pronounced dead on the scene. Investigators observed blood pooling beneath him and a small amount on a nearby gym wall. But the blood on the wall, they later said, didn't match Kendrick's DNA. There were no immediate signs of severe trauma. Later that day, Coroner Bill Watson arrived, hours after the body was found. In his report, Watson criticized the scene's handling. The body had been noticeably moved. The investigative climate was very poor. He also noted that law enforcement had not immediately notified his office, a procedural violation that would become one of many points of concern. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, performed an autopsy within days. The cause of death was ruled positional asphyxia, suffocation due to being stuck upside down in a confined space. Authorities theorized Kendrick had fallen into the mat while reaching for his shoe, got trapped, and couldn't escape. Given the mat's 14-inch diameter and Kendrick's 5'10", 160-pound frame, officials demonstrated that someone could slide in if one arm was extended overhead. Once inverted, his body weight would compress his chest and make breathing and escape nearly impossible. There were no other students in the gym at that moment, and no one heard calls for help. By late January, authorities closed the case, calling it a tragic accident. But Kendrick's family immediately voiced disbelief. They argued that his 19-inch shoulder span made it physically impossible for him to enter a 14-inch mat opening on his own. Officials countered that body positioning could allow entry, but for the Johnson family, the explanation never made sense. In June, the family obtained a court order to exhume Kendrick's body for a second autopsy. Conducted by Dr. William Anderson, the results were starkly different. Anderson concluded Kendrick died from blunt force trauma to the neck, not positional asphyxia. He also discovered that Kendrick's internal organs, from brain to liver, were missing, replaced with crumpled newspaper. Anderson later said, "We got the body for the second autopsy, and the organs were all absent." The funeral home said the organs had been destroyed by decomposition and discarded, and that the newspaper stuffing was a common filler, though that claim drew backlash. The GBI insisted they had returned the organs after the original autopsy. For the Johnsons, the missing organs became symbolic of a botched or corrupted investigation. As Kenneth Johnson said, "We thought we were burying Kendrick, not half of Kendrick." In October 2013, U.S. Attorney Michael J. Moore launched a federal review of Kendrick's death, saying his team would follow the facts wherever they lead. The FBI analyzed surveillance footage, digital communications, and interviewed nearly 100 students, teachers, and officials. Forensic video experts synchronized multiple camera angles and reconstructed a timeline. In 2014, the FBI even seized computers and phones from certain students. Throughout this period, the Johnsons remained vocal. They staged rallies under the slogan, "Who Killed KJ?" and in 2015 filed a $100 million wrongful death suit. The suit named two classmates, brothers who had once had tensions with Kendrick, as well as their father, an FBI agent. The Johnsons alleged these students had attacked Kendrick in the gym and that local and federal officials helped stage the scene as an accident. All accused parties denied involvement. The suit was later withdrawn in 2016 without prejudice. That same year, the Department of Justice concluded its federal review. After 2.5 years, the DOJ found insufficient evidence to support federal criminal charges. No proof of a crime or conspiracy emerged from the thousands of emails, interviews, and videos reviewed. While the Johnsons rejected this finding, for investigators, it was the final word. In 2018, Kendrick's body was exhumed a second time for a third autopsy. This examination supported the second, concluding the cause of death was non-accidental blunt force trauma to the neck and chest. The Johnsons renewed their push for a reopened case. In 2021, newly elected Sheriff Ashley Polk reopened the case after receiving 17 boxes of evidence from the DOJ. His team re-interviewed witnesses and re-examined all available evidence over a 10-month review. But in January 2022, Polk reaffirmed the original conclusion. Kendrick's death was accidental. He addressed popular rumors point by point, refuting claims of a school fight, love triangle, or cover-up. Polk said it would be impossible to conceal any evidence, given how many agencies had been involved. He called the years of accusations a witch hunt and encouraged the public to study all the evidence before forming an opinion. The Johnson family dismissed the conclusion. Jackie Johnson responded, "They just want this family to shut up and go away, but we are not going anywhere." In 2023, on the 10-year anniversary of Kendrick's death, the family filed a new $1 billion lawsuit against local and state law enforcement, accusing them of pushing a physically impossible narrative. The suit cited the mat's measurements, photos of Kendrick's injuries, and the missing organs as signs of either gross mishandling or deliberate cover-up. They also pointed to alleged inconsistencies in the final investigative report, including questions around surveillance footage and untested blood found in the gym. To date, no one has been charged in connection with Kendrick Johnson's death. Officially, the case remains closed, but to his family, and many in the public, this is far from over. In the years since Kendrick Johnson's body was found inside a rolled-up gym mat, the case has spawned two dominant theories. One that frames his death as a freak accident, and another that sees it as a result of foul play and a cover-up. Each theory has gathered evidence, believers, and criticism, often with passionate intensity. Here we break down the major possibilities, what supports them and what doesn't. Theory 1. A freak accident. The official conclusion. The prevailing explanation among law enforcement agencies is that Kendrick died trying to retrieve a shoe that had fallen into a rolled-up gym mat. He likely entered the vertical mat from the top, got stuck head down, and eventually suffocated. A rare but documented form of positional asphyxia. This was the original ruling from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, later reaffirmed by the U.S. Department of Justice and Sheriff Ashley Polk. Supporters of this theory point to the lack of external injuries on Kendrick's body during the first autopsy, the positioning of his body inside the mat, and environmental factors like the size and weight of the mats themselves. Surveillance footage showed Kendrick entering the gym alone. No one else was seen following him in. Investigators demonstrated how someone could maneuver into a 14-inch opening by extending one arm overhead, compressing their shoulders enough to fit. Kendrick, at 5'10" and 160 pounds, might have been able to slide in this way. Once inverted, gravity and body weight would prevent self-rescue. Students confirmed it wasn't unusual for some to hide belongings inside the mats. Critics of the murder theory emphasize the lack of bruising, defensive wounds, or blood patterns suggesting a fight. The gym wasn't isolated. It would have been extremely difficult for a violent act to occur undetected during a busy school day. The blood found beneath Kendrick was consistent with someone who died upside down, according to medical examiners. His swollen facial appearance, a detail that sparked online speculation, was attributed to post-mortem pooling of blood, not blunt trauma. As GBI spokesperson Nellie Miles put it, "The case is closed and we stand behind our original findings." But many have not accepted that. Theory 2. Foul play and cover-up. The family's position. Kendrick's parents, Jackie and Kenneth Johnson, have always maintained that their son was murdered. Their view is that Kendrick was attacked, possibly in the gym, and his body was hidden in the mat to stage an accident. They believe officials, from the school to local law enforcement, either failed to investigate properly or actively participated in a cover-up. The most common version of this theory centers on two white classmates, brothers who had reportedly been involved in a fight with Kendrick years earlier. Rumors circulated about a romantic rivalry or lingering animosity. The boy's father was an FBI agent, a detail that became a lightning rod in conspiracy theories alleging institutional protection. In a 2015 wrongful death lawsuit, the Johnsons directly accused these brothers and their father of playing roles in Kendrick's death and its alleged concealment. The foundation of this theory lies in several elements. Conflicting autopsy results. A second and third autopsy, both commissioned by the family, concluded Kendrick died from non-accidental blunt force trauma, not asphyxia. Dr. William Anderson, who performed the second autopsy, reported hemorrhaging in Kendrick's neck area near the carotid artery, consistent, he said, with being struck. The third autopsy reached a similar conclusion. Missing organs and body treatment. During the second autopsy, Kendrick's internal organs were found to be missing. His torso had been stuffed with newspaper. The GBI said they returned the organs to the funeral home. The funeral director claimed decomposition led to disposal. But the use of crumpled paper as filler outraged the family. As Kenneth Johnson said, they stuffed him like he was a trash bag. Apparent physical impossibilities. The Johnsons and their attorneys have repeatedly emphasized that Kendrick's shoulders were 19 inches across, wider than the mat's 14-inch diameter. They argue it was physically impossible for him to have climbed in voluntarily. This claim remains central to their latest lawsuit, filed in 2023, which states the accident theory is a physically impossible narrative. Disputed video evidence. One of the most talked about anomalies in the case is the surveillance footage. A forensic video analyst hired by CNN in 2013 reported missing timestamps and unexplained gaps in the footage around the time Kendrick entered the gym. Though the FBI later reconstructed the footage and determined that the cameras were motion-activated and not synchronized, the perception of edited or missing footage fueled suspicion. As one Reddit post put it, "You don't lose hours of video if you're being honest." Unexplained blood. Investigators noted blood on a nearby wall didn't match Kendrick. They dismissed it as old, but for critics, it's another piece of evidence they feel was brushed aside. Rumored confession. In 2017, a recording surfaced of an unidentified male voice saying, "They're gonna catch me. I killed that boy." The Johnsons turned it over to investigators. Sheriff Pork later dismissed it as unverifiable and likely unrelated. Still, some believe it points to something bigger. Pattern of alleged obstruction. The delayed arrival of the coroner, the disturbed crime scene, uncollected shoes, untested blood, and the lack of timestamps on video footage have all been framed by the family as signs of either incompetence or complicity. For those who believe this theory, it's not just about one suspicious death. It's about racial injustice, institutional mistrust, and the belief that powerful people were protected. As Jackie Johnson has said, if Kendrick had been white, this would have been solved long ago. Theory 3. Accidental death, but not alone. A less widespread but occasionally floated theory combines aspects of both camps. It suggests that Kendrick may have died accidentally, but in the presence of others who panicked and staged the scene. According to this version, a group of students may have been messing around with the mats or roughhousing, and something went wrong. Instead of calling for help, they rolled him into the mat to make it look like an accident. This theory attempts to account for both the physical oddities and the lack of clear evidence of a struggle. Supporters argue that the mat could have been tipped or moved, allowing Kendrick to fall in horizontally or semi-accidentally. When he was found upright, it might have been because someone repositioned the mat later. This version doesn't require a violent assault, just fear, bad judgment, and a desire to avoid punishment. However, there's little concrete evidence to support this idea. No one has come forward to say they witnessed such an event. There are no camera angles showing other students near the mats at the critical time. The only support comes from gaps in the video footage and the physical difficulty of entering the mat vertically without assistance. Still, this theory is occasionally mentioned in forums as a middle ground between the official story and full-blown conspiracy. These are the dominant narratives: a solitary accident with no one else involved, a murder covered up by a web of complicit actors, and a panic-fueled mishap concealed by scared students. Each is shaped by who you believe, which autopsy you trust, and whether you think key facts were ignored or engineered. But only one explanation best fits the evidence, avoids speculation, and survives scrutiny under Occam's razor. That's what we'll explore next. After years of investigations, lawsuits, and speculation, the central question remains: what most likely happened to Kendrick Johnson? Applying Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation requiring the fewest assumptions is usually the correct one, leads us to examine two paths: a complex conspiracy involving assault, cover-up, and institutional silence, or a tragic, solitary accident that appears too bizarre to accept at first glance. Let's start with the central claim of foul play. The family's theory rests on the idea that Kendrick was attacked and his body staged inside the mat. However, when tested against verified data, this theory begins to fragment. No individuals have ever been credibly placed in the gym at the same time as Kendrick. Surveillance footage analyzed by FBI experts showed him entering the gym alone at 1:27 p.m. By that point in the day, class transitions were winding down. Cameras from nearby hallways, synchronized across the school's motion-activated system, did not capture anyone following him in. One of the students accused in the family's lawsuit was documented on another part of campus at that exact time. The other was en route to a wrestling event off school grounds. The idea that these individuals could have slipped into the gym, attacked Kendrick and staged a scene without leaving any DNA, noise, or visual trace would require everything from altered security footage to a coordinated cover-up across local, state, and federal agencies. That's not impossible, but the number of moving parts makes it far less likely. Moreover, despite a federal review that spanned over 2 years, included nearly 100 interviews, and reviewed tens of thousands of digital records, no evidence of assault, motive, or conspiracy was ever found. Officials considered possible racial or institutional bias. They reanalyzed autopsy data. They even investigated an anonymous voice recording that seemed like a confession, but none of it led to a charge. One of the prosecutors involved in the federal case said plainly, "We found no actionable evidence of a crime." This brings us to the alternative, a version of events that doesn't require a confrontation, a conspiracy, or even a second person. It requires only an unsafe habit and a devastating moment of miscalculation. What likely happened is this. Kendrick went to the gym during a brief break between classes to grab a shared pair of shoes he stored with a friend. These shoes were often hidden in the rolled-up mats standing upright behind the gym bleachers. Students confirmed this wasn't unusual, especially for those who didn't want to pay locker fees. Kendrick had done this before. By this time, the shoe may have slipped deeper inside the mat. Maybe it had landed just out of reach. Surveillance showed Kendrick entering the gym with intention, at a jog, possibly trying not to be late. It's likely he tried to retrieve the shoe by climbing on nearby mats and reaching in from the top. These mats were heavy and difficult to move. Tipping one over might have been hard to do alone, so he used the vertical opening. Stretching downward, arm first, he might have lost his balance and slipped in head first. Once inside, the situation would have become deadly within minutes. In an upright position, his weight would have pressed his chest against his knees and compressed his lungs. Blood would pool in his head, cutting off oxygen. The position wasn't just uncomfortable, it was fatal. And tragically, no one was nearby to hear or help. The gym was not empty, but it was quiet enough and the mats tucked far enough away that his calls for help, if any, went unheard. His face later appeared severely swollen. While some viewed this as a sign of beating, medical examiners explained it as consistent with blood pooling from being upside down for hours. Likewise, blood beneath the mat matched the expected behavior of a body in that position. Other injuries, minor abrasions on the neck or hands, could have occurred as he struggled to free himself inside the narrow tube. These did not indicate a violent altercation. The most contested part of the case, the missing organs, remains disturbing but likely unrelated to cause of death. The GBI claimed all organs were returned after autopsy. The funeral home said decomposition had rendered them unusable. Either way, it's a failure of post-mortem care, not necessarily of criminal investigation. The use of newspaper as cavity filler is undeniably unprofessional, but not unheard of in cost-cutting or rushed embalming situations. It angered the family, and rightly so, but doesn't by itself signal a cover-up. As for the bruising noted in the second and third autopsies, those conclusions came long after the body had been embalmed, dissected, and in one case, exhumed twice. Tissue breakdown, embalming artifacts, and even interpretation bias can affect late-stage examinations. Forensic disagreements are not uncommon in high-profile cases, especially when private pathologists are retained by families seeking alternative explanations. In fact, one of the examiners later revised their cause of death from homicide to undetermined after speaking with federal investigators. That shift underscores how even experts found the case difficult to pin down without making assumptions. The theory that someone killed Kendrick and placed him in the mat demands a chain of events nearly flawless in timing and concealment. It requires assailants to leave no marks, no trail, and no witnesses, and for multiple agencies to ignore, destroy, or falsify evidence without a single whistleblower in over a decade. In contrast, the accident scenario only needs a moment of isolation and a tragically plausible mistake. Even in hindsight, this scenario doesn't stretch the facts. It explains the body's position, the lack of trauma, the blood behavior, the surveillance timeline, and the absence of suspects, all without invoking corruption or deception. It may not be satisfying, but it's the version that survives every layer of investigative scrutiny. That doesn't mean the family's anger is unjustified. The investigation did suffer from procedural lapses, such as the delayed arrival of the coroner or the careless treatment of the body by the funeral home. These failures created an environment where mistrust flourished. The Johnsons were thrust into the public eye, facing unimaginable grief while being given what must have felt like an implausibly simple answer. Their refusal to accept the accident theory is rooted in love and loss, and the belief that their son deserved better. But justice isn't a matter of what feels right. It's a matter of what can be proved. And in this case, despite years of searching, no credible evidence of foul play has emerged. There's no murder weapon, no assailant, no confession, no forensic confirmation of a fatal blow. Only heartbreak, gaps in communication, and a tragic set of circumstances. What most likely happened is that Kendrick Johnson fell victim not to violence, but to misjudgment and bad luck. He climbed into the mat to retrieve something he needed and couldn't get out. It was an accident, bizarre, rare, and devastating, but one that doesn't require an elaborate explanation to make sense. That conclusion may not bring closure, but it does bring clarity.